The first sign that everything was about to go sideways on Tetraprime orbital station wasn't the alarm. The alarms on Tetraprime were, to put it mildly, melodramatic. They were calibrated by a species that communicated primarily through panic shrieking, so a misplaced shipment of nutrient paste triggered the same level 3 klaxon as an imminent reactor breach. No, the first real sign was the smell. It was a smell that cut through the station's recycled, ozone and anxiety-scented air. A sharp, acidic, floral scent, like a botanical garden had declared war on a battery factory. It was the kind of smell that made your back teeth ache. To High Proctor Zorp, a Glorpian whose entire physiology was an exercise in fragile, gelatinous dignity, the scent was an immediate, existential threat. His 3 primary nostrils flared, then sealed themselves with a wet little plop. "Report," he gurgled, his voice a masterpiece of strained authority. His translator implant rendered the sound into crisp, unhelpful standard galactic. Beside him, Dr. Ilara Vex, a Xylocean scientist whose 6 spindly limbs were currently a blur of activity across her console, didn't look up. "Containment failure, Xenobotany Sector Gamma, 7. It's the Hyperjon death bloom. Atmospheric sensors are reading, oh, by the swirling void, they're reading 9,200 parts per million of fluoronic acid vapor. If you're not a Xylocean biochemist, and I'm going to go out on a limb and assume you're not, that number means very little. Let me translate, it meant that the air was now composed of approximately 0.92% pure, unadulterated doom. For most carbon-based life in the known galaxy, inhaling fluoronic acid vapor was like gargling with industrial-grade paint stripper that also happened to be a neurotoxin. It was, to use the technical term, very, very bad. The third member of this panic trifecta, Security Chief GRRNAK, a Kthar warrior built like a pile of angry rocks held together by sheer belligerence, was already doing the only thing he knew how to do. "Seal the sector. Bulkheads on my mark. Evacuate all non-essential personnel." His voice was a gravelly roar that made the deck plates vibrate. He was a creature of simple, direct action. If a problem couldn't be solved by either hitting it or sealing it behind a 2-ton slab of reinforced durasteel, it wasn't a problem GRRNAK was interested in. And then there was Alex. Alex was human. Specifically, he was the station's officially designated human interface consultant, a title so vague it was basically meaningless. In practice, it meant he was the guy they called when some piece of ancient, pre-Federation human tech, like a coffee machine or a toaster, broke down. He was leaning against a support girder, watching the chaos unfold with the mild, detached interest of someone watching a particularly frantic nature documentary. The red emergency light strobed across his face, making him look alternately demonic and bored. He took a long, slow sniff of the air. His nose wrinkled slightly. The 3 aliens, encased in their own little bubbles of professional panic, all turned to look at him. Zorp, gesturing with a trembling, translucent appendage, managed to project an aura of pure, unadulterated condescension even in the face of imminent death. "Human. You are not in your designated safety habitat. Your primitive respiratory system will liquefy. You must." Alex held up a hand, cutting him off. He took another deliberate sniff. A thoughtful expression crossed his face, the look of a wine connoisseur trying to place a particular vintage of Armageddon. "Huh," Alex said, his voice calm and utterly out of place amidst the blaring sirens and panicked alien chatter. "Smells like Beijing on a Tuesday." There was a moment of profound, echoing silence, broken only by the insistent wail of the alarm. Dr. Vex's 6 hands froze over her console. GRRNAK paused mid-roar. High Proctor Zorp's eye stalks, all 3 of them, swiveled to focus on the human with an intensity that could have peeled paint. The translator implant in Zorp's collar whirred, trying to find a cultural equivalent for Beijing. It failed spectacularly, offering up a series of confused suggestions: minor atmospheric discomfort, localized industrial event, a place of spicy food. The machine was as baffled as its owner. "What," Zorp finally managed, his voice barely a whisper, "is a Beijing?" Alex just shrugged, a gesture that was somehow more infuriating than any explanation. "It's a city. Back home. You get used to the air quality. This is actually a little fruity. Kind of an improvement, really." He looked around the bridge, which was rapidly descending into a full-blown circus of terror. A small, furry maintenance drone had short-circuited and was now just spinning in circles, bumping gently into the wall. So, are we gonna do something about this, or? The collective alien mind of the command crew failed to process this. Here was a creature, a soft, squishy, notoriously fragile primate from a backwater planet, standing unprotected in a corrosive, lethal mist, and he was critiquing the aroma. It didn't compute. It was like watching a fish complain that the water was a bit too wet. Dr. Vex, ever the scientist, recovered first. Her analytical mind discarded the impossible and settled on the merely improbable. His personal biomonitor must be malfunctioning. Chief, get a medical team to retrieve the human. He's likely hallucinating from acute neurotoxin exposure. GRRNAK nodded, his purpose restored. He pointed a claw the size of a wrench at two of his subordinates. You. Hazard suits. Grab the primate. He is delusional. Alex watched the two armored Kthar security guards lumber towards him. He didn't move. He just crossed his arms and raised an eyebrow. Look, fellas, I appreciate the concern, really. But I'm fine. The air's a bit soupy, but it's not gonna kill me, he paused. Probably. I mean, ask me again in an hour. But for now, I'm good. This statement, delivered with the casual certainty of someone discussing the weather, was the final straw. It broke the fragile dam of procedural thinking that held Tetraprime together. For the advanced, intelligent, and highly specialized beings on the command bridge, the universe had just stopped making sense. And at the center of it all was one bafflingly nonchalant human who thought a Class 7 biohazard smelled vaguely of home. The real crisis hadn't even started yet. The two Kthar guards, clad in bulky, chrome-plated hazard suits that made them look like refrigerators with anger management issues, approached Alex with a caution usually reserved for unexploded ordnance. Through their helmet comms, their breathing was heavy and ragged. To them, every particle of air Alex was casually inhaling was a microscopic death sentence. Human, do not resist, the lead guard growled, his voice distorted by the suit's speaker. We are here to ensure your survival. Alex sighed, a long, weary sound. Guys, seriously. I'm okay. Your suits are probably making you sweat more than this air is hurting me, he pointed a thumb at his own chest. No melting, see. No spontaneous screaming. Vitals are, well, they're about what you'd expect for a Monday. From the sealed-off command center, now protected by a shimmering, golden energy field, Dr. Vex was frantically pulling up Alex's live biometric data on the main view screen. The other senior officers huddled around, their various alien faces a gallery of disbelief. According to the data streaming from the wrist cuff monitor Alex was required to wear, his heart rate was a placid 72 beats per minute. His blood oxygenation was 99%. His neural activity showed mild boredom. This is impossible, Vex stammered, tapping her console with 3 of her hands while using the other 3 to adjust her multi-lensed spectacles. The fluoronic acid should be causing catastrophic cell lysis in his pulmonary system. His lungs should be pudding. His synaptic pathways should be firing randomly. He should be reciting nonsensical poetry and trying to mate with a fire extinguisher. Hi, Proctor Zorp's eye stalks narrowed. Are you certain the device is calibrated for the primitive human physiology? Perhaps their normal state is one of near-total systemic collapse. It would explain much about their history. Alex, overhearing this through the bridge's open comms, called out, "Hey! I can hear you. And our history is very dramatic, thank you very much. And for the record, my lungs are disappointingly solid." The lead Kthar guard reached out a heavy gauntlet to grab Alex's arm. Alex didn't flinch. He just looked at the guard. You really want to open that suit in here? Because I'm pretty sure the warranty doesn't cover exposure to aerosolized death plant juice. The guard froze. He hadn't thought of that. The seals on their suits were rated for vacuum and radiation, but a corrosive, atmosphere-borne molecular acid was a different beast entirely. A single microscopic tear, and he'd be joining Dr. Vex Pudding Lungs Club. He slowly retracted his hand. GRRNAK's voice boomed over the comm, he has a point. Stand down. Maintain a perimeter around the human. If he starts to dissolve, I want to know immediately. The 2 guards shuffled back, forming a loose, uncertain circle around Alex. It was a bizarre tableau, a single, unimpressed man in a jumpsuit, surrounded by two heavily armed walking tanks who were clearly more scared of the air than he was. Meanwhile, the situation was deteriorating. Red lights on Dr. Vex's console were blinking out, replaced by angry, solid reds. "The vapor is spreading," she announced, her voice tight with panic. "It's bypassed the secondary containment seals in Sector Gamma 7. The atmospheric scrubbers for the entire habitat ring are offline. The primary control node is, oh, stars and stones, it's in the heart of the xenobotany wing." This was bad. This was very, very bad. The xenobotany wing was now ground zero, a swirling green terrarium of death. The only way to reactivate the station's life support was to send someone into the one place where survival was measured in seconds. Zorp's gelatinous form quivered. "This is a procedural nightmare. All protocols dictate that we wait for the automated hazmat drones. Where are they?" A junior officer, a timid-looking creature that resembled a bipedal snail, squeaked, "The drones are, also in the xenobotany wing, Proctor. That's where their charging station is." Zorp made a sound like a deflating whoopee cushion. Of course they were. The entire station was a monument to bureaucratic irony, a place where the fire extinguishers were kept in a locked room that was, itself, on fire. All eyes, both organic and holographic, turned back to the view screen showing Alex. He was still just standing there. He'd found a datapad and was casually scrolling through it. He looked up, noticed everyone staring, and gave a little wave. "What?" he asked. "Something I can help with." The silence that followed was heavy with the dawning, horrifying realization that yes, there was. The only mobile, sentient, and inexplicably non-dissolving asset on the entire station was the one person they'd collectively dismissed as a glorified appliance repairman. The fate of Tetraprime, its multi-species crew, and High Proctor Zorp's very expensive collection of ornamental space ferns, now rested on the shoulders of the guy who thought a toxic gas crisis was a bit nostalgic. The universe wasn't just illogical, it had a mean-spirited sense of humor. GRRNAK, for his part, was starting to feel a strange, unfamiliar sensation. It felt a little like respect, but mostly like a headache. The conversation that followed was one for the history books, assuming anyone survived to write them. It was conducted via intercom, with the station's three most powerful figures huddled behind their shimmering energy shield, and Alex standing in the middle of the toxic fog, occasionally swatting away a floating spore like it was a lazy housefly. "Human, Alex," Zorp began, forcing a tone of strained diplomacy. "We are facing a significant operational challenge." "You mean the air that kills everyone but me?" Alex replied, not looking up from his datapad. "Yeah, I noticed." The screaming was a clue. Dr. Vex cut in, her voice a rapid-fire burst of technical jargon. "The fluoronic acid is a highly specific polypeptide chain inhibitor. It targets the K7 enzyme complex responsible for cellular respiration in 99.8% of all known sentient species. It appears your species, for reasons that are frankly baffling from an evolutionary standpoint, utilizes a completely different enzymatic pathway. You don't have the K7 enzyme. Your cells are literally ignoring the toxin." "Cool," Alex said. "So I'm weird." "We knew that. What's the plan?" "The plan," Zorp intoned, puffing himself up, "is for you to act as our remote agent. We need you to proceed to the secondary engineering junction on sublevel 4. From there, you will need to manually reroute plasma flow from the tertiary conduit to the backup atmospheric scrubber array. This will require you to splice 312 fiber optic relays in a precise sequence, which Dr. Vex will dictate to you." Alex finally looked up from his datapad, a blank expression on his face. He stared at the camera for a solid 5 seconds. "You want me, the guy who gets called when the coffee machine makes a funny noise, to manually splice 312 fiber optic cables while you read instructions to me? In the middle of this green stuff? It is the only logical solution." Vex insisted. "The relays are shielded. The procedure, while complex, is our only hope of reactivating the scrubbers without causing a cascade failure in the station's power grid." Alex just shook his head slowly. He pointed a finger off camera, towards the far end of the bridge. "Okay, question. What's that big red button over there, under the sign that says, Emergency Atmospheric Purge?" A collective gasp went through the command center. It was so synchronized it was almost rehearsed. That is not an option. Zorp shrieked, his composure finally cracking. Protocol 7, Gamma, 12 explicitly forbids a full atmospheric purge except in the event of a Class 9 mimetic contagion or an uncontrolled Grey Goose scenario. It would vent the entire habitat ring to the vacuum of space. Yeah, Alex said calmly. That's kind of the point, isn't it? Get rid of the bad air, the station automatically pumps in new air. Problem solved. You would destroy decades of priceless research. Dr. Vex wailed. My Hyperjohn death bloom. It's the only specimen this side of the Magellanic Cloud. The other flora. The symbiotic fungal colonies. The delicate mosses. The stuff that's actively trying to murder us all. Alex clarified. Yeah, I'm okay with losing that. Look, your plan sounds complicated. Complicated means it can go wrong in a lot of different ways. My plan is simple. I walk over, I push a button. The bad air goes whoosh. The good air comes in. We all go back to pretending to work. It's elegant. GRRNAK, who had been silent up until this point, rumbled, the human's logic is direct. He was a military commander. He understood the value of overwhelming force and decisive action. The idea of solving a problem by violently ejecting it into space appealed to his Cthar sensibilities. It is barbaric. Zorp countered. It is brutish. It is the equivalent of performing brain surgery with a hammer. Is the patient dying? Alex asked. Because if they are, and all you've got is a hammer, you start swinging. This is what we on Earth call the IT department solution. Have you tried turning it off and on again? The translator implant struggled with that one, too. It offered Zorp the phrase, have you attempted a forced cessation and subsequent reinitiation of the device? Zorp's eye stalks quivered with rage. This was insanity. He was the High Proctor. He was a master of bureaucratic maneuvering, a connoisseur of regulations. He had flowcharts for how to file other flowcharts. And he was being lectured on crisis management by a primitive who thought the solution to any problem was to hit it with a rock, or in this case, the vacuum of space. But then, another alarm started blaring, a lower, more ominous tone. The junior snail officer looked at his console and turned a pale shade of green. Proctor, the acid vapor, it's beginning to corrode the emitter matrix on the command center's energy shield. Structural integrity is at 91% and falling. Suddenly, the debate was no longer academic. Alex's simple, brutal plan was still on the table. Their complex, elegant, and regulation-compliant plan was now on a timer. And the clock was ticking very, very fast. The mood inside the command center shifted from panicked debate to panicked acceptance. The steady ping of the shield integrity alarm was a constant, nagging reminder of their mortality. Dr. Vex's calculations showed they had, at best, 20 minutes before the shield failed and they were all introduced to the concept of lung-pudding firsthand. This is a disaster, Zorp moaned, his gelatinous body slumping. A complete and utter violation of established safety parameters. The parameters are being dissolved, sir, GRRNAK said, his voice a low growl. The human's plan is now the only plan. Zorp let out a sound of profound defeat. Very well, he addressed the comm, his voice dripping with condescension and despair. Human Alex. You are authorized to proceed with your crude proposal. However, he added, a spark of his bureaucratic nature flaring back to life, you must first verbally accept the terms of Emergency Action Waiver 1138 Delta. You will be acting as an independent agent, and Tetraprime Command will be held legally and financially blameless for any and all damages incurred, up to and including catastrophic station failure, loss of life, and incidental scuffing of floor panels. There was a pause. On the view screen, Alex could be seen scratching his ear. So if I screw this up, it's my fault, and if I save everyone, you guys take the credit. That is a simplistic but functionally accurate summary of the waiver, yes, Zorp confirmed. Yeah, okay, fine. I accept, Alex said with a shrug. Just send the bill to my supervisor. He'll know what to do with it. He turned and started walking towards the xenobotany wing, his stride unhurried. I'm going to go push the button now. And so began what would later be referred to in hushed tones by the station's survivors as the walk. It wasn't a march of grim determination. It wasn't a heroic charge. It was a stroll. A leisurely, almost lackadaisical amble through a corridor of certain death. The security cameras tracked his progress, broadcasting the surreal journey to the main view screen in the command center. The emergency lighting cast long, dancing shadows. The air was thick with a glowing green haze, so dense it was like walking through a phantom fog. Droplets of condensed fluoronic acid dripped from the ceiling, sizzling where they hit the metal deck plates. Alex, however, seemed utterly oblivious. He walked with his hands in his pockets, occasionally whistling a tuneless, off-key melody. He passed the station's main cafeteria, where a variety of half-eaten alien meals were now slowly dissolving on their trays. He paused to look at a particularly vibrant purple plant that was pulsing with a sickly light as it spewed more poison into the air. "Huh," he muttered to himself, his voice picked up by the corridor's comm system. "That's pretty." In the command center, Dr. Vex was having a minor breakdown. He's admiring the flora. The flora that is actively synthesizing a Class 7 neurotoxin. Does his species not have a self-preservation instinct? Apparently, it was replaced by an instinct for detached curiosity, grrnak rumbled. He was watching the screen with an expression that bordered on awe. His own people, the Kthar, were famed for their bravery, but it was a warrior's bravery, a roaring, chest-beating defiance of death. This was something else entirely. This was a quiet, profound, and deeply confusing lack of giving a damn. Alex continued his journey. He had to step over the prone form of a Rigel Yen courier who had been caught in the initial blast. The Rigel Yen, a silicon-based life form, wasn't dissolving, but he was unconscious, his crystalline skin covered in a fine layer of corrosive green dust. Alex paused, nudged him gently with his foot to make sure he was just out and not something worse, then continued on his way. "Shield integrity at 64%, the snail officer reported, his voice trembling. The view screen switched to a camera just outside the main doors to the xenobotany wing. The massive durasteel doors were sealed, with a flashing red hologram that read, "Extreme biohazard, do not enter, survival probability, 0.001%. Alex walked right up to it. He looked at the warning, then at the camera, and gave a thumbs up. He swiped his all-access maintenance keycard. There was a hiss of depressurization and a clank of locking bolts retracting. The giant doors slid open, revealing a scene straight out of a fever dream. The xenobotany wing was a massive, multi-leveled arboretum, now transformed into a glowing, green hell. The Hyperjon death bloom at its center, the source of all the trouble, was a monstrous thing, a pulsating, phosphorescent nightmare of petals and thorns. The air inside was so thick with vapor it was almost liquid. Alex didn't hesitate. He just walked in. "He's inside," Dr. Vex whispered, her voice filled with a kind of horrified reverence. "The concentration of fluoronic acid in there must be astronomical." "Shield integrity at 52%, came the relentless report. On the screen, Alex was a small, solitary figure wandering through a cathedral of death. He followed the service catwalk that ringed the upper level of the arboretum. Below him, priceless, deadly plants sizzled and melted. He was heading for the far wall, where a small, unassuming maintenance panel was located. And on that panel, glowing with a faint, inviting light of its own, was a very large, very red button. It was almost anticlimactic. The solution to their multi-billion credit crisis was a simple button, waiting patiently in the middle of a toxic apocalypse, for someone who didn't have the good sense to die on the way to it. As Alex reached the emergency purge control panel, a palpable sense of relief washed over the command center. It was a short-lived sensation, of course, because this was Tetraprime, and nothing was ever that simple. The panel itself was a thing of bureaucratic beauty. The big red button was there, just as advertised, gleaming like a ruby of salvation. However, it was housed under a thick, transparent cover made of what looked like diamond-laced crystal. Set into the cover were 3 distinct biometric scanners, one for a Glorpian appendage print, one for a Xylocyan retinal scan, and one for a Kthar claw signature. To open the cover and press the button required the simultaneous authorization of the station's 3 highest-ranking officers. It was a safety feature designed by a committee that had clearly never imagined a scenario where all 3 of those officers would be trapped together in a different room, about to be melted by acid. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," Alex's voice crackled over the comm. In the command center, Zorp actually let out a small, triumphant gurgle. It was a horrible sound, but it was unmistakably one of vindication. Ah. You see. Protocol. The triple redundant safety interlock has prevented a rash, unauthorized action. We are saved from our own folly. We're saved from our only solution, you gelatinous moron. Dr. Vex shrieked, her scientific composure completely gone. The shield is at 41%. We are going to die because of a safety feature. GRRNAK just slammed a massive fist on his console, cracking the surface. This station was designed by idiots. On the screen, Alex was examining the crystal cover. He tapped it with his knuckle. It made a dull, solid thud. He looked up at the nearest security camera. Hey, guys. Quick question for the big, rocky fella. GRRNAK leaned towards his comm pickup. Speak, human. This clear case thingy, Alex said, tapping it again. What's it made of? Looks fancy. Is it stronger than, say, a standard issue emergency fire extinguisher? A profound silence fell over the command center. Every eye swiveled from the view screen to GRRNAK. The security chief's rocky features were unreadable for a moment. He seemed to be processing the sheer, unadulterated pragmatism of the question. He was a creature of rules and regulations, but he was also a warrior. And the warrior in him recognized the beautiful, simple, and deeply satisfying logic of applying overwhelming kinetic force to a problem. The casing is reinforced crystalloy, GRRNAK rumbled, a slow, dangerous grin spreading across his face. It is rated to withstand a plasma discharge of up to 500 kilojoules, he paused, letting the technical specifications hang in the air. The standard Mark IV fire suppression unit, however, is a 20-kilogram cylinder of compressed, high-density foam and solid duranium. It is not subtle. Good to know, Alex said. He walked off screen for a moment. There was a sound of clanking metal, then he reappeared, holding a bright red fire extinguisher. It looked comically large in his hands. He hefted it, testing its weight. Proctor Zorp, I am logging this as a necessary and sanctioned breach of protocol under the Emergency Powers Act, Section 3, Subsection B, GRRNAK announced formally, mainly for the benefit of the station's recording logs and his own conscience. You will do no such thing. Zorp sputtered, but it was too late. Alex took a stance like a baseball player at bat. For the record, he said, looking at the camera, this is for every time I've had to fill out a requisition form in triplicate just to get a new light bulb. Then he swung. The sound that came over the comm was glorious. It wasn't a clean shatter, it was a percussive, crunching explosion of crystalline shrapnel. The view from the security camera was momentarily obscured by a shower of glittering dust. When it cleared, the biometric lock was a mangled wreck, and the big red button was exposed, vulnerable and waiting. Alex tossed the dented fire extinguisher aside, dusted off his hands, and with a complete lack of ceremony, pressed the button. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening roar that shook the entire station, massive vents in the ceiling and floor of the xenobotany wing slammed open. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The thick green fog didn't dissipate, it was ripped away, sucked into the unforgiving vacuum of space in a swirling vortex. Plants, soil, research equipment, and the unconscious Rigel Yen courier, who was thankfully tethered to a gantry, were all pulled towards the vents. Emergency shutters slammed down over the open vents with a series of concussive booms that echoed through the station. The roar of escaping atmosphere was replaced by the hiss of the life support system kicking into overdrive, pumping clean, breathable air back into the ravaged sector. The immediate crisis was over. The alarms cut out, replaced by the calm, synthesized voice of the station computer, atmosphere restored. Toxin levels at 0.00%. Have a nice day. In the command center, the energy shield flickered and died, its job done. The air, now smelling faintly of ozone and victory, was safe. Dr. Vex was slumped over her console, her 6 arms limp. Zorp was quivering, speechless. GRRNAK let out a single, booming laugh. They had survived. They had been saved by a primitive, a barbarian, a man whose primary problem-solving technique was, have you tried hitting it with something heavy? It was humiliating. It was magnificent. The command staff, shaky but alive, made their way out of the bridge and towards the now safe xenobotany wing. They found Alex leaning against the wall next to the wrecked purge panel, looking completely unfazed. The wing itself was a scene of utter devastation. Every plant was gone, either vented or flash-frozen and shattered. The deck was covered in a layer of frost and debris. It looked like a hurricane had passed through a greenhouse. Zorp found his voice. It was shaking with rage. Human. You have caused millions of credits in damages. You have destroyed priceless scientific specimens. You have violated over 17 separate station protocols. I will see you brought up on charges. I will have you demoted. I will have you cleaning plasma conduits with your tongue. Alex just looked at him. You're welcome, by the way. It was at that precise moment, when Zorp was inhaling to deliver a truly epic tirade about regulations and property damage, that a new alarm began to sound. This one was different. It wasn't a panicked shriek, but a deep, resonant, and profoundly worrying klaxon that vibrated in your bones. A new holographic warning appeared on the wall. It read, "Warning, orbital decay imminent. Trajectory intersect with gas giant in 58 minutes. Everyone froze. They had solved the small, immediate problem of everyone dying from poison gas, only to be confronted with the much larger, more cinematic problem of the entire station becoming a man-made meteor. The violent, station-shaking purge had knocked their delicate orbital mechanics completely out of whack. They were, to put it simply, falling. And the big, swirly gas giant below was not known for being a soft landing spot. The frying pan had been escaped, and the fire was looking awfully close. The new panic was of a distinctly higher quality than the old panic. The first one was about surviving the next 5 minutes. This one was about surviving the next hour. The stakes had been raised from personal annihilation to collective, fiery, and gravitationally assisted annihilation. Dr. Vex was back at a terminal, her hands flying across the holographic interface. The purge, the sudden atmospheric pressure differential and the emergency vent recoil, it acted like an uncontrolled thruster. It's pushed us into a decaying orbit. The station's primary stabilizers are offline. The automated systems are trying to compensate, but they can't handle this much deviation. High Proctor Zorp's gelatinous form seemed to be collapsing in on itself. Astrogation. Get me astrogation. What are our options? The snail officer, who was having the worst day of his entire short life, whimpered, "The astrogation department is on the other side of the habitat ring, sir. They're locked down. They can't get to the main navigation controls on the bridge." "Of course they can't," GRRNAK growled, slamming his fist on the wall this time. "Why would the people who fly the station need to be near the controls that fly the station? What genius designed this layout?" It was a rhetorical question, but everyone knew the answer: a committee. A committee that had prioritized scenic window views and interdepartmental traffic flow over trivial things like crisis management. "We are doomed," Zorp gurgled, a sound of final, utter defeat. Doomed by poor architectural planning and a reckless human with a fire extinguisher. Alex, who had been quietly observing this fresh wave of hysteria, cleared his throat. No one paid him any attention. They were too busy running in circles and contemplating their impending doom. He cleared his throat again, louder this time. Ahem. GRRNAK was the first to notice. He turned his stony gaze to the human. "What is it, Alex? Do you have another button you wish to press? Another priceless piece of equipment you want to break?" The sarcasm was thick, but there was a sliver of genuine curiosity underneath it. Alex ignored the jibe. He was looking at a maintenance schematic displayed on a nearby wall panel, the same one he'd been scrolling through earlier. He tapped a section of the glowing diagram with his finger. "So, funny story," he began, in a tone that was far too casual for the situation. "You know how I was talking about the IT solution? Turning it off and on again." Dr. Vex looked up, her antennae twitching with irritation. "Human, this is not a malfunctioning data slate. This is orbital mechanics. We need to perform complex delta-V calculations and execute a precisely timed engine burn." "Yeah, about that," Alex said, pointing more insistently at the schematic. "According to this, the orbital stabilizers and the main gyroscopic array are all routed through the secondary power generator. It's an isolated system, probably so a power surge from the main reactor doesn't fry the delicate navigation equipment." "Your point?" Zorp demanded, his voice weak. My point, Alex said, turning to face them, is that the system is trying to correct for a massive error, but it's stuck in a feedback loop. The computer is probably freaking out. But if you were to, say, shut down the secondary generator for about 10 seconds. He let the sentence hang in the air. The three aliens stared at him. The idea was so stupid, so insultingly simple, that it took them a moment to even process it. You want to power cycle the entire station's navigation and stabilization system? Dr. Vex asked, her voice a high-pitched squeak of disbelief. While we are in an unstable orbit. It would force a hard reboot of the whole system, Alex explained patiently. When it comes back online, it won't have any memory of the old, messed-up telemetry. It'll reread the station's current position and orientation from scratch and start over. It's a clean slate. That is the most insane, idiotic, reckless, Zorp began, but he was cut off by GRRNAK. The Kthar warrior was staring at Alex, his eyes wide. He wasn't looking at a maintenance technician anymore. He was looking at some kind of chaotic space wizard, a shaman of a forgotten, brutally practical religion. It might work, GRRNAK rumbled, the thought dawning on him. When our battle simulators crash, we do the same thing. We purge the memory core and restart. It is the same principle. This isn't a simulator. Vex protested. The power-down sequence alone has 47 steps. Or, Alex said, pointing to a large, covered lever on the wall behind Zorp's command chair. You could just pull that. That's the manual cutoff for the secondary generator. Flip it off, count to 10, flip it back on. The final tableau was perfect. The entire senior command staff of Tetraprime Orbital Station, representing 3 of the most advanced and intelligent species in the quadrant, stood frozen, staring at a simple lever. Their multi-trillion credit station, a marvel of modern engineering, was plummeting to its doom, and the only proposed solution came from the resident primitive, who was essentially suggesting they give it a good whack to get it working again. Zorp looked at the lever. He looked at the countdown timer, which now read 42 minutes. He looked at Alex, who gave him a little nod of encouragement. With a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of every broken protocol in the galaxy, High Proctor Zorp reached out a trembling appendage, and pulled the lever. The lights on the bridge flickered and died, plunging them into the red glow of the emergency backup lighting. And in the sudden, terrifying silence, everyone started counting to 10,